The following program was recorded live.
Because many of you are in the 2nd District, we also extended an invitation to the candidates in the GOP primary for that district, Congressman Brett Guthrie and challenger Lee Watts. Unfortunately, Congressman Guthrie's campaign declined our offer, but we are really glad to have with us tonight Lee Watts. Lee, welcome. Thank you for taking time out of this busy primary season, and people are now paying attention. There's a lot going on, but thanks for taking time to be with us.
I appreciate it, Jim. Any chance to talk to the people, let them know where I stand, what separates me from my opponent, I'm always very happy to do that.
You have quite a varied background. You like to say, and this is on your Twitter profile, that you're a combat veteran who's still fighting for his country. What do you mean by that? And tell us a little bit about the other work you've done and how you think your background would prepare you to represent the 2nd District in Congress.
Yes, everyone in the military has to take an oath on day number 1 that they will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And that oath does not expire the day that you take off the uniform in active duty. And I believe a lot of our constitutional rights are being trampled. And in that oath, I said, I will defend it against all enemies, foreign or domestic. And I really believe a lot of our greatest threats to our constitutional rights are coming domestically. So I want to go up to Congress and continue to defend our life, being very strong pro-life, and the liberties that we have so enjoyed that I believe are under great risk nowadays.
Well, speaking of life, we've had this leak of the Roe v. Wade court decision. What can you as a congressman do about that? What impact can you have on those things, and what would be your response to that?
Well, I don't think there should have been a leak. Things that are confidential should be confidential. I'm very encouraged about what the leak is leading us to believe. I've been a very strong defender of pro-life. I've been helping that cause here in Kentucky in different ways for more than 13 years. And I think it's one of the things that separates me from my opponent is that back in 2020, he voted for a bill which included funding Planned Parenthood with $80 million. And I think that is, how can you call yourself pro-life and fund Planned Parenthood? I will always defend the life of the unborn, and I'm very happy to do that.
But you know, that's kind of a dichotomy, because Congressman Guthrie, he's getting a 100% rating from the National Right to Life Committee for his voting record on abortion. He's got an A rating from the National Rifle Association. He says he's a person of strong faith. So that is the question. What differentiates you, and how would you explain those ratings versus some of the votes you've just mentioned?
I think we see here one of the problems with these national organizations trying to keep the status quo. There's not a matter of debate. We have the congressional record. He did vote for a bill in May 2020 that funded Planned Parenthood with $80 million. I don't consider that pro-life. Back in September of last year, he did vote for a bill that would take gun rights away from veterans and what is called a red flag gun grab law. I don't call that being pro-gun. So what I think we're seeing through those people who would give an endorsement versus a voting record. I think the voting record speaks a lot louder, especially to the people, than what any endorsement may come from any organization.
Well, let's talk economic issues for a moment. Some economists are predicting that a recession is unavoidable. What policies would you support to both prevent that or mitigate the negative impact on our country of such a recession?
I think energy independence is key to that, because every single store has to have stuff shipped to it, either by train or by truck. So we need to get back to mining our own coal, to using our own oil. We need to reopen the pipelines, continue construction, and I think energy independence would be key to really staving and reversing the inflation problem.
You must have known what my next question was here. What can Washington actually do to lower gas prices,
That's
lessen our
exactly
dependence?
what we should be doing.
Exactly right. Let's talk about the overall tax burden on Americans. What do you believe it's too heavy and too burdensome? And if so, What can be done about that, and what can be done to encourage real new economic growth in our country?
I do believe we are, as the Tea Party says, taxed enough already. I very much believe that. I think the solution to this is to go from an income-based tax structure to a consumption-based tax structure. This would also encourage saving, because if it's consumption-based, I'm only paying taxes when I buy something. So it is encouraging the people to save, making them less dependent upon government, more able to adapt when there's an emergency because they have reserves, and it would also have every person who is here illegally immediately start paying into the system instead of only taking away, and I think it actually would increase our resources.
And there's ways to do that without hurting the poor, and exempting some items, that are necessary.
Like foodstuffs and things like that. And, maybe have a higher tax rate on luxury items.
Yeah, and the state legislature this year, the Kentucky General Assembly took some positive steps toward getting rid of our income tax rate, slowly but surely, hopefully, and states around us have done that. When it comes to education, teachers' unions have been flexing their muscles really since Joe Biden took office, especially. And they're a powerful special interest which opposes just about everything that's conservative, not just education. But of course, when it comes to education, they have really gone to the mat to deny parents the educational freedom that we believe they should have, and to decide where and how their children are educated. They have lots of money, they have lots of power, and they've doubled down on their opposition to school choice, to education reforms, even though parents nationwide, here in Kentucky, have found out some things during this pandemic about what is or is not happening in their schools. What would you do to thwart the ideological agenda of teachers' unions and help expand school choice and give parents and kids more of a voice?
It's all tied into one particular answer. Is I think we need to have more local control, less federal control. Ever since Jimmy Carter came up with the nationalized education program, our education quality has gone down in nearly every single metric. So I would be back to giving that to more local control. I believe it was Jefferson who said the government that is governs least and local is the one that does it best. So I would like that to go as local as possible. And you can't get more local than state control and parental control, where they decide where their kids are going. And through something such as charter schools that builds competition within the public school system. This is not only going to be a benefit for students, it is also going to be a great benefit to our teachers, because these schools are going to have to recruit the best teachers and be in competition. I think it will be one of the absolute best things for our teachers, and I fully support that.
The 2nd District is experiencing some tremendous economic growth.
Yes, we are.
Down in Bowling Green, we've had announcements in Louisville and Bowling Green. What are your thoughts about that? Are you excited about that? And how would you use that to build into even more growth for our state and make our state more competitive?
Yes, Bowling Green, one of the fastest growing places in the state. Also Elizabethtown, Owensboro as well. It has been said before, if America is a body, then Kentucky is its heart. And I would like to see a lot of the money that we are currently shipping overseas, I would like to see a lot of that rediverted back here to home, specifically to infrastructure programs. And I think the 2nd District would be a key place to do that. We are a hub that is not being realized or utilized to its full potential, and I will be fighting very hard to get infrastructure dollars poured into the 2nd District.
In your bio, you reference Peter Muhlenberg, one of our founding fathers who was also a Lutheran pastor, who, as history indicates, wasn't willing to stay in the 4 walls of his Lutheran church, but rather he raised and commanded an entire regiment in the Continental Army. He also had a military career and then was elected to Congress, and by his state legislature at that time, which elected senators as a U.S. senator. That's kind of the path you're trying to follow here, Lee. Translated, I guess, to 2022 and what that means here. Still, that background of ministry, of military, of being involved politically, it's an interesting background. How would that serve you?
I think that's the way America was founded. There's a wonderful series of historical lessons that is called the Black Robed Regiment. And actually, Peter Muhlenberg is seen as the poster boy for that, as that America was built upon Judeo-Christian principles. And we don't need to get that out of government. We need more of that into government. It was actually his brother, Frederick Muhlenberg, who was the very first Speaker of the House of Representatives. And at the same time, he was also a full-time Lutheran pastor. Only 2 people ever signed the Bill of Rights. One of them was James Madison, and the other was Frederick Muhlenberg, a full-time pastor.
Yeah.
So I intend to bring my faith to the floor of the House.
Back to the incumbent, Congressman Guthrie, talk about some of the other differences. We talked a little bit about some of the votes, but talk about how your time in Washington, how it would be different. What would you do differently?
I'm going to stick to the conservative principles that the people of the 2nd District send me there to do. When I was considering if I was going to enter this race, I looked up the voting record of my opponent, Mr. Guthrie. It's very simple to do. All you have to do is Google 2 words, Liberty Score, and it'll take you to this wonderful website that show you how everybody actually votes, not what they say, how they actually vote. And I saw he has an F rating when I Googled Liberty Score. I don't think he ever met a taxing or spending bill that he didn't like. So I will be sticking to my conservative principles. I will never fund Planned Parenthood. I would never vote to take guns away from veterans. I'm not going to be supporting these omnibus spending bills. Just back in March, he voted for a $1.5 trillion omnibus spending bill that included funding Biden's vaccine mandates. I am personally for single-issue bills, not omnibus bills. I'm opposed to the out-of-control spending, and I totally oppose these Biden vaccine mandates. And those are some key things that would separate me from him.
So on the COVID bills and the infrastructure bills, how would you have voted?
I would have voted no for 2 main reasons. One, as mentioned, it did include funding Planned Parenthood, and I will never compromise on life. Number 2, I was watching an interview on KET from Congressman Andy Barr 2 weeks ago, and he had talked about in the COVID relief bill, only about 10% of the money went to actual COVID-related programs, and 90% of the money was on pork. And and my opponent voted for it, and that's one of the key things that we must get our financial house in order. We've got to get rid of all of this pork, and I think one of the solutions is getting rid of these career politicians, and I'm trying to do that here next week.
You've also talked about bills should be divided up more, where you vote on particular issues rather than omnibus bills. You talked a little bit about how important that is.
Yes, these omnibus
where you could vote on, maybe part of a bill you would agree with, right?
Right. It has to do with type of line item veto.
Yeah.
Some of it might be good, some of it might be bad. What we are seeing is with these omnibus bills that they're putting in all of this pork, unrelated projects that if the American people knew about it, there's no way they would ever support it. But if you have a single issue bill, then the people are going to know more how their money is being spent. You're going to cut out a lot of this waste. And so I am a very strong supporter of single issue bills.
This is a job interview, really. The voters are deciding who they're going to hire. If they hire you to go to Washington, how will you work with the leadership? How will you work to get some things done for your district there? What's going to be your approach?
I would like
Congressman Watts.
Congressman Watts has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? First thing I want to do is I want to reach out to some of the other, what I call America First congressmen and women, people such as Congressman Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, other people who are standing up for these America First principles and to take over the Republican Party with people who really stand on our platform and get rid of what we call the rhinos, or as I like to refer to them as undocumented Democrats.
Well, foreign policy for a moment. If President Trump had been reelected, do you think that things would have been different here? Do you think there would have been a difference?
Everything was better under President Trump.
But I mean, in terms of foreign policy, in terms of what's happened in Ukraine, for example, let's take that as an example. What do you think? What do you think about that situation, and how important is it that we portray strength in order to prevent war, in order to prevent these kinds of crises?
That's a great question. It goes back to something that President Reagan said. He said, peace through strength. If you are strong, then your enemy doesn't want to dare go up against you. I think a lot of the problem we're seeing in Ukraine right now is because of what Joe Biden did with the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. It showed to the world that America has weak leadership. We are abandoning our allies and a great deal of our equipment. If President Trump had been there, I think if we had withdrawn, we would have done it in proper military fashion. First you get out your allies, then you take home your equipment, and then you withdraw the troops. And had we done that, we would have been shown as somebody taking care of our allies in a position of strength and would have greatly discouraged Putin from what he's doing today.
Well, Congressman Guthrie, says he's a big supporter of President Trump and has been
what he says.
supported his policies. So what is your response to that?
I would like to again point to the voting record. I think there is a giant difference between mudslinging, which would be a personal attack, and sticking to the voting record. People should know what their congressman has been doing. Back during the election night, I repeatedly spoke out publicly and often how I believe it was a fraudulent election, and yet my opponent voted against the president and voted to certify Biden into office. Back during Trump's administration, he withdrew American troops from Syria, something I very much support. As someone who's fought in foreign wars as a combat veteran, I think America's been in way too many of these foreign wars we had no business in. Well, my opponent, Mr. Guthrie, voted with the Democrats to condemn President Trump for getting us out of that. So he didn't support him in his reelection. He didn't support him during his time in office. So when we really come down to it, the voting record says a lot more and a lot louder than one of his talking points.
Yeah. Well, just a few seconds left. And on the issue of defense spending, is it possible to differentiate between needed military spending and waste and fraud in defense spending? This is something Senator Paul has talked quite a bit about. That just because you're opposed to spending a great deal more on defense doesn't mean that you can't have a strong military and strong defense.
Well, one of the Air Force, I was in the Air Force, one of the things we love to say is fight smarter, not harder. And I think we should again cut out wasteful spending. When I was in the Air Force, I actually won the Airman of the Year award in the Air Force level because I was able to accomplish a program at about $1.5 million less than what had been done in the other bases. Yeah. So yes, I think we can spend our money smarter instead of spending more of it.
Lee Watts, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, Mr.
Best
Waters. I
wishes
appreciate it.
in this race.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.